Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature successful business leaders, top law firms, green energy companies, and more. Today, we are joined by the CEO of Motives Met and the author of the upcoming book, Work Life Well Lived, Kelly Mackin. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so great to be here today.
I'm glad you could join us. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until a hacker's done whatever bad deed they came to do. A hacker's job is to bypass security, and they're getting better at their job every day. With CyberLink's intrusion detection, you'll know if a hacker finds a way past your security before they can do harm. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Kelly, I'm so glad you can join us. I'd love to talk about your company, Motives Met. There's a lot there. And for those who aren't familiar, can you kind of give us the elevator pitch?
Absolutely. So we really built our platform at Motives Met on our mission to help create a human work world with true well-being. And we've developed a lot of actionable insights and tools to make humanizing work possible and really empower people to create their best work life and workplace. So we have done a ton of research in this space, which led us to our no BS approach and pathway to well-being that gives really tangible steps for employees and leaders to really thrive at work. And from those insights, we've developed our human needs assessment. And this is a huge part of what we do. From our research, we've developed a framework that uncovered there are 28 psychological, emotional, and social needs, what we call motives, that really drive what health and happiness at work is all about. But what you need most to be happy and healthy at work is going to be different than what I need most. Well-being is very personal. So the assessment really shines a spotlight on the motives that are most important to each person. And it helps leaders to be able to identify how strong are these different 28 needs in our culture? Are they thriving or are they suffering? And why is that? We've also developed our human connection software that builds off the assessment to make sure that meaningful conversations around these motives happen at work, because they tend to be a missing conversation. And if we're not talking about these human needs, then our ability to meet them and create a real people-first culture where these human needs are met is going to be really tough.
Super cool. A lot to unpack there. Well, let's go into so these human needs. What are some of these human needs that you're kind of talking about here?
Yeah, let me give you a few examples. So there are 28 of them, as I mentioned, and they fall into kind of 10 overarching buckets or motive domains, as we call them. And if you go to our website, motivesmet.com, we have this really cool visual framework that makes it super easy to grasp. But for example, in the freedom domain, we have the free expression, autonomy, and flexibility motives. In the balance domain, the work-life harmony and balance pace motives. So belonging is a motive, passion, purpose, trustworthy leadership, fairness. So there are 28 of these different things, and some of them can really be put on a pedestal or be treated with favoritism in our workplaces. And some of them can be judged or misunderstood or kind of put to the wayside, even if it's unintentionally. So we say that it's really important to embrace motive diversity at work and really respect the, really diverse needs that every one of us has in the workplace.
So, that's really interesting, because I think, so I'm assuming that something like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is kind of almost archaic in comparison, right? Would that be a fair assessment? Because
there's been a lot of people who've poked holes in Maslow's hierarchy. And what's actually really interesting is that when he developed his framework, it was actually not in a pyramid. So he actually did not say you have to meet the basic needs first and then kind of move up to self-actualization. And it really mirrors what we found in our research. Because, for example, we have security or calmness as motives that you could argue are kind of more of those basic needs. But we find that some people really aren't as driven by that. Some people are driven by innovation and challenge and risk taking, and they don't need that feeling as much of security at work. Certain entrepreneurs are like, I'm willing to go take those risks, and that's what I need to live my best work life. But someone else could be completely different.
I think that's an excellent example. I think we've all seen it. It's funny because I came from originally a military background. I spent 10 years in the Army, and part of that, we had these government contractors that we worked with and government civilians. And it was funny that the government civilians, totally different mindset. These people, they loved their stability in their government job, and I think that, to a lot of people, that's irritating. It's like, ugh, you're just there because you can't be fired and blah, right? But I think, to your point, it's those are the needs that they need. And in my ignorance at the time, it's like you either bet the farm and you go all in and you're giving it your all every day, or you're just, you're just not really trying like the rest of us. And I think you found that that's a bunch of dookie, to say the least. A primitive way of looking at it, to say it. So how does that's basically what you're saying here, is that there are all these different needs that need to be respected, right?
Absolutely. And what's interesting when you look at our framework is that our data showed that motives that are closer together are more likely to be correlated, and ones that are further apart can really hold more tension and are less likely to be correlated. So there can be a dynamic tension between these needs, and that can happen internally and it can happen externally. So, for example, we've worked with some people who say, God, I have a top need for future success in my work life. I also have work-life harmony as one of my top needs. And these are really conflicting because my big goals are taking a lot of time right now, but I have the need for my personal goals and to be with my family. So how am I going to make this work? There can be that tension there. And even on teams, we see it. Again, someone could be really driven by innovation and another team member by security. And those needs can sometimes cause friction in relationships. So when we're able to understand where each other are coming from a bit more and respect those things, then we're able to compromise and strategize and figure out a way forward. But without that awareness of those things, it makes it a lot tougher. So that's what our assessment kind of helps you do, whether it's for yourself or for the people you work with or lead at work.
That's awesome. I mean, it's funny because now we're just kind of scratching the surface, and already I'm like, oh shit, there's like all this. I've been such an ignorant bastard about so many people for so long. It's like, wow, but it makes sense. And we're just scratching the surface. So I want to dive in now. This assessment, I'm assuming, is this kind of like a Myers-Briggs type of assessment? How does it work?
Absolutely. Well, first, I want to make a comment. Like you said, I have been there too. I do not pretend that I have not judged other people's motives in my work life, because we have a natural tendency as humans to think that what we need and how we feel is what other people need and how they feel.
Yeah.
So this is a really common thing that we all struggle with. But to answer your other question, the assessment is similar to a Myers-Briggs or a Strength Finders or emotional intelligence for some people who might be familiar with those. There's a similarity in the sense it's an online assessment that takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete. And once you've completed the assessment, you automatically get your top 5 motives. So these are your top needs driving your ability to be well and perform well at work today. And then your personal report gives you all sorts of great stuff to help you strengthen those motives, where you can put together a well-being action plan, where you can develop what we call your motive story. And my favorite part of the report is we have these awesome motive reflection questions that really make you think about these needs in a way that you probably haven't thought about them before.
Um, so I got to ask, when you get that, because I'm used to like the Myers-Briggs, and I think a lot of organizations do that, and that it's cool to be like, oh, I'm that type person and you're that type. But I've never seen anybody do anything with that other than oh, that's cool type thing. And it's just like, bleh. So we spent all this time as a team getting to know each other. We didn't get to know Jack about anything. It was just cool that you could, from a bunch of questions, put me into some box. Cool. So I'm really excited to hear what, how does this play out with, your assessment and thereafter, how, how do you do that? What's that look like?
Oh my goodness, you are preaching to the choir here, because that is one of the things that we find frustrating on our team in general. Our co-founding team are human behavior researchers at heart, and insights into yourself can be so helpful. Awareness from these assessments is great, but if you don't take action, then it really doesn't help you elevate your life in any capacity. So that has been a huge driving force for us, is making all of these insights and things we do actionable so that people really can change their work life, their work relationships, and their workplaces. So what we find is coworkers may know what someone did over the weekend. They may even know that, hey, for Myers-Briggs, you're an extrovert or an introvert, but they don't know what matters most as a human being to you. And other people don't know that about me. And when we talk about creating human workplaces with compassion and kindness, which leads to all sorts of other benefits that our research shows, understanding each other as human beings is just the core of all of that. And that has been one of the most powerful things when we do workshops with teams and companies. I mean, from laughter to tears, there are these human connection moments that never happen outside of these workshops because we're all busy. We're go, go, go. We're getting the work done. And then in today's virtual environment, it makes it extra tough for these conversations to happen. So if you don't create a time and space for these conversations to happen, they're not going to happen. And that's really part of the process we've built in is, again, how can we create a software, a technology that makes sure human conversations around this happens? How can we
do that?
So the software is really cool. And this became a request by a lot of leaders because they said, man, we want to keep working on this. We want to keep doing it. Our team is asking us to do it. So we were like, okay, let's go build it. Because all these people talk about have human conversations with your team. Well, if I'm a manager, I go, okay, well, what do I do? How do I do that? What questions do I ask? What do I do? So how we've built it is I would see, for example, these are the top 5 motives that matter most to you. And if I'm a manager on a team, let me look at those. And rather than just asking someone, hey, are you happy at work? Do you hate it here? Do you love it here? If I can ask better questions, I'm going to get way better answers. So if someone on my team has work-life harmony, we've built in the software all these really great questions to ask them about their work-life harmony. Are you an integrator? Are you a separator? Do you do best when you have a clean start and stop time? Hey, when I send those emails at 10 p.m., does that stress you out and make you think you have to respond? Or, hey, you have autonomy and flexibility. What's one area of your work life you'd like more freedom in? How can I support that as your leader? What do you find most purposeful and meaningful about the work you do? And what do you find least? And can we maximize that? So we give leaders and teams all of these amazing detailed questions that, again, just don't come up. And you can't expect a manager to have in their mind the way to have optimized, effective conversations around these 28 needs themselves. You need to give them the tools so they can be successful. And that's essentially what the software does. It's just right built in based off the assessment and makes it super easy for these conversations to happen and be optimized and meaningful.
I mean, that's awesome and wild. And I can't help but think that with these 28, things that you've kind of got to hold in your mind. I think for so long, I've simplified things into say, hey, look, for our company, for our people, we've got to be mission driven. That works for me because I'm mission driven. Like, great. I love the Army because we had a mission. I love our company because we have this mission of protecting all of our clients from the bad guys. Great. I don't, and I just assume that's what drives everybody else. I don't think it does. But so it kind of falls, I don't know if it falls flat, but it just doesn't really apply. Great. We all have a mission. And you see so many companies, and we've had so many people on the podcast where we talk about their mission statement and how they work it into the meetings. They really drill it and drill it and drill it until everybody's kind of, it's rote for everybody. And they're just, yep, blah, 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 and they can recite it. You ask them the mission statement, blah, 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 and they can recite it and they know it. And okay, cool. But it's kind of like that round peg, square hole type thing, or whichever direction that goes, whatever. It seems like it is far more, dynamic and complex than that. That is it's not even an oversimplification. It just doesn't work. You're seeing one tiny little part of the picture and you're saying, oh, that's what's going on. You're missing the whole picture. But, and I know am I getting to a point? So my question is, so with 28, which obviously from what you're saying makes perfect sense, do you get to a point with 28 things where it's all just kind of natural and you're like, oh, Jane is this type and this is what she needs. And so I'm not going to email Jane at 10 because I know it will stress her out. And I think that's a great example. But I know I can email Kelly at 10 o'clock at night and she won't give two hoots, or she's up at 11, and working at 11. She loves that stuff. Right. But that's just one. And then you've got 28. Is it something that after a while it becomes kind of natural in riding a bike, where at first you're like, I can't balance and steer, and right? Does that happen, or how's that work?
It does. It gets easier. And I think having these tools that we've built makes it get easier. And that's a big part of what we drive home with leaders is you have to formalize some of this, these conversations, the assessment. But as you do that, you're starting to build it into your culture. You're starting to make it more of the norm that it's psychologically safe to bring this stuff up. That I start to be more curious about the people around me and ask these questions. So we kind of call it the ultimate door opener. When you use this, you're opening those floodgates, and then you're going to be able to build from there. And I loved what you were saying about the mission and purpose and how that drives you, but might not drive everybody. And of course, it's still great for leaders to drive that home in an organization, but you just have to know that that might not be driving someone on your team. And so let's say I need growth in my work life right now, where I need to feel like I belong and maybe I don't. You could push purpose all day long, but if my motives aren't met, I'm going to be leaving. So that's the reality of the situation. And we say it isn't easy. It's tough for leaders. There are 28 of these things, and that's difficult. But when we give you the assessment, it makes it easier to go, okay, on my team of 10, how can I understand what I need to do to make sure this person is happy and wants to stay? I don't have all the time in the world. So how can I make sure what matters most is working for each person? So we say it actually helps people focus, because all of these 28 needs aren't going to be thriving at the same time for an organization, for any given person. So if you can streamline and focus, that's going to be a big part of what helps you be successful. And when you share as a leader, for example, this framework and what you're trying to do with employees, one, they go, wow, you care. This is cool that you're investing time and energy in it. But number two, we have found it really helps employees and teams have compassion for you. They kind of go, okay, this isn't really easy for you to get. Everybody has different needs. Some of them conflict. This is tough. And you bring them into it, because a big thing we talk about, and I talk about in the book, is that well-being at work is co-created. It happens when leaders and work peers and individuals show up for themselves and one another to keep these needs healthy. Whether it's the fun motive or peer appreciation or growth or purpose, the degree that that need is going to be met for me is going to be based on other people in my work life. So, that's a whole thing I could talk a ton about, but hopefully that sheds light on what you were saying.
I love that. And I guess that what I'm trying to, it certainly does. And it makes me think, okay, now as a leader, what do those conversations look like? Right. So I've got this framework we've done. I'm assuming that in general, you have everybody kind of take the assessment, so we can now see, where everybody lands, what their needs are, what motivates them, what doesn't, right? And now you get a better understanding of who those individuals are, right? And then what do you do from there? Like when you talk about these conversations, that have to happen, what kind of conversation are we talking about?
Well, you have to start to look at motives from an individual, team, and kind of cultural level. So you've got to look at them from these three different lenses. So once my team, for example, takes the assessment, a really great next step is either to have a workshop with them or to kind of have some type of offsite or build it into our meetings or conversations. And we give resources to help people do that, and we can help facilitate those things. But it's kind of like, okay, let's look at our team and look at our team circumplex. So we actually develop that framework we have and we go, okay, what are maybe the 8 needs rising to the top for your collective team? And let's get everybody on the team to understand each other a little bit more and see which motives rise to the top. And then brainstorm on where are these needs strong and where are they weak? And what are different ideas we can bring to the table to strengthen them? And where should we celebrate? Because that's a huge thing too that we talk about. We don't talk about the good stuff enough. And that also gives a platform for that to happen. Then a really good next step is let me have one-on-ones with each person to just go, hey, I care about you as a human. Let's take some time to talk about these needs at work. Let me ask you some really awesome questions that's going to get the conversation going. And at the end of that, I'm going to have some really simple to-dos, both for the employee and me. Great. I think I have a really good grasp on what I need for this team member to be happy, to want to stay, and to perform their best at work. And then I need to sit there as a leader and go, how am I impacting these motives? Am I leading with motives in mind? So in the book, I really help leaders take that kind of inward lens and look in the mirror themselves and go, okay, where am I supporting these things? Maybe where can I do better? How can I get that feedback from my team? And then even look at it from a cultural standpoint for senior leaders. In our culture, our processes, how do we support these and how do we maybe hurt these?
Hmm. I mean, I think that's a great one, and it leads really well into what I wanted to talk about next, which is how this it sounds like this is more what kind of the younger generation, part of their beef with the work-life balance, and the older generations where we tend to be like, yeah, of course you're going to grind for 20 years so that you can, make your way in the world. What are you talking about? What? I didn't sleep for 12 years, which pretty much didn't. Right. And then it's like, what are you complaining about? You don't want to work 70 hours this week? That's crazy. So is that a fair assessment? Is this something that kind of bridges that divide? It sounds like that's what kind of Gen Z is looking for and not getting in the workplace.
It definitely is something that resonates with younger generations that have a different mindset. But I would say from the pandemic, one of the kind of silver linings was that the work well-being movement that was already underway, it really just lit fire to it, to really everybody, because they had a chance to reflect and really think about what they desire and deserve at work. And there is all sorts of research, including our own, that say people are demanding well-being at work now, that they view it as a right, not a privilege. And that's really how it should be. But we absolutely feel this framework helps bridge the gap. Because as a senior leader, you could say, hey guys, we got to achieve, which is the motive. We got to reach towards our bigger goals, which is the future success motive. And how do we balance that with work-life harmony and flexibility and some of those things? And it's honoring that, again, it's probably not going to be perfect. But if we can come together and have this conversation, then we can be more strategic about it. We can work through it. We can compromise instead of me just kind of as a leader ignoring it and then having employees walk out the door because their needs weren't met. So we kind of view these conversations as stay interviews, is what we call them, instead of exit interviews. Let's not wait until people leave. Gallup had done some great research that said 52% of people who had exited their job in the last year said that no one, not a single leader or manager, had any sort of conversation with them about their health and happiness at work in like the last 6 months of their job, I believe. And then 51% of those people said that there is something that could have been done to keep them, but those conversations didn't happen. So if you want to look the other way and pretend like grinding is just the way it is, then you're just going to lose out on some really good people. And our research shows that when people's motives are met, they are more likely to stay. They are not going to be looking for a new job. They're more productive, connected, happy, all of these great things. So if you actually want to have people perform better at work, then supporting these needs is the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think on a very kind of simplistic basis, people understand that, well, you cannot work productively for 24 hours straight, let alone 48 or 72. At some point, it's ridiculous. And we know that even from something as simple as studying or that your performance after 45 minutes to an hour, how much you're learning starts to drop off. And if you just take a 5-minute break from that, it then picks right back up. And so there is this kind of human side of productivity. And that's just one tiny little aspect of it that I think people get. Like, oh yeah, I cannot work somebody 7 days straight without a break. That's insane. It obviously can't do that. So where's the balance? And going back in time, it was 6 days a week until Henry Ford found out that he had more accidents. If he just dropped it down to 5, people were more productive and he had fewer accidents. Great. Well, and nobody even wants to broach, what about 4? You're right. Then it's like, you slackers, right? Yeah. Well, 4 might be amazing. People might just kick ass for whatever, 32 hours, way better, and be far more productive in those 32 hours than they would in 40. Why wouldn't you do that? Right. But nobody even wants to think about that because like slacker, the mentality is like, right. So I think what you're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like this is, you take that tiny little obvious basic thing and you expand it to the human experience in all of these areas. And now you have a kind of a framework of understanding what drives Jane and Jimmy and Joey. And I don't know why it's all J people today for me, but why all the J's are doing what they're doing, right? So I don't know about the other letters of the alphabet, but the J's for sure. So would that be fair? Am I getting that?
Yeah, I mean, just understanding that if you have that conversation with employees, it goes a long way. And hey, let's say you can't honor as much of the work-life harmony right now. Let's say you're in your busy season of work. Let's say that's the reality. How can you best support their other 4 motives to make up for it? How can you say, hey, I get this motive isn't healthy right now and I'm working on it? That can go a huge long way. And even with coworkers, I had someone on our team early on when we were starting Motives Met and we were grinding, man, and she had work-life harmony as a motive. And we talked it through. At one point, she was like, this motive has gotten so low that it's harming my other 4. And I said, thank you for bringing that up. And she said, well, thank you for creating a space where we have the shared language to talk about it. And so then it became, how can we problem solve? How can she still work on the bigger strategic objectives? But honestly, me just responding to some emails she'd send later at night saying, thank you. I know this was a tough deadline. I know work-life harmony matters, and I really appreciate it. She commented back and was like, do you know how much that means to me, that this is meaningful to you? So sometimes the simplest little things can truly go a long way. And having the conversation, again, just that open communication is huge. And some people on your team might not be in that work-life harmony season too. And that doesn't mean you can be a slave driver, but there'll be a lot of social media influencers, for example, that will tell you, hey, this is the answer to your work life. You just figure out what you're passionate about. You're going to be happy. If you can just work remote anywhere, if you can just have work-life balance. And to be honest, we call BS on all of that because there is not one golden ticket, and these motives are going to evolve over your work life. So for example, I went through terrible ill-being at work to get to the place where I have such a passion for well-being that I've, created this whole thing and decided to go on this wild journey to help, improve the work well-being movement. So work-life harmony was at one point really important to me coming out of burnout and stress in a truly toxic, terrible work environment. But right now, I am working a ton between doing the book and building the company. Work-life harmony is not a top motive for me. Future success is a top motive for me. And, when people have asked, hey, what are you doing over the weekend? And I'm like, I'm grinding on my book. I've gotten a lot of like, hell yes, and you got this. But I've also gotten people, oh, you work too much. Isn't your company all about well-being? Shouldn't you be working less? And I would reflect and go, no, that's not true. That's not the season of work I'm in. Me trying to maximize my personal time and work time would actually harm my well-being. Because right now in my life, my big, huge dreams for the future are what matter most to me. But I absolutely will be back in a season where work-life harmony probably takes precedence. And that's the reality, the ebb and flow of life. So again, it's about taking that judgment away and not pretending like there are these perfect answers or simple solutions to having your best work life.
I love that. I mean, it is a much more sophisticated way of viewing the entire situation. And I think up until how long's it been now? 30-ish minutes. Up until now, until this conversation, I'd say my view of the situation, people's motivations, and how you apply it. Yeah, it's one thing to be kind to somebody, and it's always come very easy for me to connect with people and have people feel like they're cared for on the team and have those conversations. But never have I had kind of this understanding that there is a much bigger you know, um, framework. There's so much more to really understanding what drives somebody. And it's not because the fact that they need more work-life balance doesn't mean that they are a slacker. I think that for me, that's always been kind of a big one. It's like, really, you just want to check in at 9 and check out at 5. And 5:01 comes and you're out the door. And I'm like, okay, it's cool. You go home. I got it. Right. Slackers. Right. But right.
Yes, yes. No,
But that's
I
completely
know where you're
wrong.
coming
But
from.
and it's really, I think it's so great that I think you're giving people the right sort of language and framework to say, oh, yeah, this makes sense. It's not a matter. Before it was always combative of workers and slackers, I think, in my mind. And I know that, and I think for a lot of people, and I think that's the problem between the generations is it's such an overly simplified point of view on kind of both, well, at least one end for sure. And I think the younger generation's looking for it seems like what you're proposing here. What you're trying to present to people is exactly what they lack the vocabulary for it. I think is the issue. They're like, there's more. I don't know what it is, but there's got to be better work-life balance. And there's no way to implement that. And you're now coming in to give companies and everybody not only the language, the understanding, but the methods to provide that. Yeah.
I love that you drive home this point because it is such a point of contention still in some workplaces. And, I told you about that person on my team who had the work-life harmony motive and it was kind of struggling. But that doesn't mean, like you were saying, that they were a slacker or that I still didn't have certain expectations. Because I had the achievement and future success motive. And I said, hey, when you keep missing deadlines and dropping the ball and not communicating to me, that's hurting my motives. And we still got to get this stuff done. So how can we problem solve? How can we work through this? So it's not about perfection. And that's another thing we really try to make sure everyone understands. So we call it the attainable dream of a work life well lived for a reason, because we feel like we take a much more realistic approach to something that is possible in our work lives, in our workplaces of, hey, I'm not going to get 28 of these needs thriving right now, but if I could get my top 5 pretty healthy, if I could get 4 of them to be thriving and one of them kind of coasting, I can feel pretty good about my work life. So it's not about this kind of unrealistic ideal, but something that really empowers you to be able to take control as a leader, as a coworker, as a person, and feel like you're making real progress and change. I love that I can say, I'm happy and healthy at work and I have well-being, but it's not just because I'm kind of guessing or don't know. I know exactly why. I can tell you my 5 needs that matter most to me right now are thriving. That is exactly why I am so happy at work. But that also allows me to be aware when they're starting to slip. That allows me to be preventative with my well-being instead of reactive, which is a really important thing in the book that I talk about, because prevention is better than cure. So why do we wait until so many employees are walking out the door? Why do we wait until we're so burnt out and miserable at work to do something about it? So the assessment in the book and the pathway we've built goes, no, let's become empowered to be checking in on these things that matter most so that we don't get to that point.
I love this. So, how does somebody get the assessment? How?
You just go to our website, and at checkout, you can just purchase the assessment. You take it, it's really simple. You get your report. If you're a leader, you're able to purchase it, same thing, right on our website for your team. But we often have leaders kind of reach out and we'll send out the assessment for them and give them a workshop and all these other resources. But we make it a really simple and streamlined process and really fun. People have said it's really fun, and it's been fun for people, they said, to talk about with their families or their husbands or their friends. So my mom is actually one of the co-founders of our company, and she just laughed when she heard some of my motives, because she goes, God, that makes so much sense, but I couldn't articulate why sometimes we would butt heads, and this makes a lot of sense. So it's fun.
I love that. Okay. So they go to motivesmet.com.
Correct.
Click on the take the assessment link there. They can purchase it there. How much is it?
It's $34. And with the purchase of the book that will be coming out the first week of April, you get a free code to take the assessment.
Oh, super cool. I love that. So first week of April?
First week of April. Yeah. We want to get this in the world. Again, we want people to be empowered. So as I walk you as a reader through our pathway in the book, it's awesome because you have your assessment, you have your top 5 needs, and then you're able to really, again, take all these actionable steps that I give you throughout the book, because I've designed it to be a book you do, not just a book you read. It is truly an actionable book.
I love that. Now, for the business leader who wants to kind of take their team through it, take their company through it, what services do you guys offer for businesses, for the whole business?
So when you kind of come on board with us, we make it really simple. We help you kind of organize your different teams and what your goals are on different teams, but we'll send out the assessment for you. And then you get like a team report and company report. So as a leader, as a manager, we kind of hold your hand and say, okay, this is rising to the top for your group. Here's what you're going to want to think about with employees. We've developed these 10 work-life well-lived principles that really help a team and organization develop what we call the motive mindset. Because as you were saying, we need to really create sustainable change by using the assessment. And when you get your team to develop this mindset around how to show up at work, how to honor these motives, how to co-create well-being together, that's just going to really help elevate it that much more. So we give leaders all those great resources, and then we can do a follow-up workshop, which is really fun with your team, where we do all these exercises and people get to share motives and, again, work on ways to strengthen them. Leaders have loved walking out of this workshop, and they have all these different ideas of small things and big things that can be done to support these needs that they just wouldn't be able to come up with themselves. And then their team members feel really empowered. They're like, this is really cool. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. And then for leaders who want to use the software, we onboard them with that, make it really simple. So now they can go kind of continue these workshops themselves using our software, having these one-on-one conversations or these stay interviews, as we call them, again, so that you don't have to do the exit interviews. And then we offer coaching and webinars and training and that kind of fun stuff too.
Fantastic. Now, the workshops, you offer those in person, or are they all virtual?
Both.
Okay. That's super.
Both.
I mean, what more could you want? That's fantastic. So your book comes out at the beginning of April, first week, you said. Is this,
Yes.
I'm assuming Amazon seems to be the place for all books these days?
Yeah, it'll be available wherever, but most people tend to order it off Amazon. That is true. That is the way of the world nowadays.
That's fantastic. And the Kindle version, I'm not Kindle, but audio version, are you?
Yes, audio version will be coming out probably beginning of summer.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Now, we love, and I know we're running kind of close on time, but we love founder stories. And I'd love to hear from you kind of what was the inspiration, how you went from idea to actually implementation. So, no two founder stories are the same. So, if you could, what was yours?
Well, are we talking going back to the journey of what led me to create Motives Met? Kind of,
Absolutely.
okay. Well, I grew up in an interesting situation in my household because at first I saw my mom, who was this amazing trailblazer, senior vice president of a global ad agency, just loving her work. She had such purpose from it, such confidence, and it truly lit her up. And then her company got bought out and everything changed.
Mm.
It became a complete nightmare. I talk in the book about how there's this one morning I remember so vividly where I walked downstairs at the age of 10 and my mom was making pancakes. And I was like in shock because my mom didn't have time to make pancakes. She was off for work. She was getting ready for work. It was like weekdays, there were no pancakes. And I was like, what are you doing? And she laughed and was like, oh, well, I've just stayed up all night. And I thought I deserved a break to make you pancakes. And from then on, it became all nighters, working into the wee hours in the morning, working every weekend became the norm. She had really passive aggressive leaders. She was no longer innovating at work. She was just drowning to keep up. So I saw like this really interesting dichotomy of just how great work can be and how it can support your well-being, and then just how much it can completely ruin it and be the thing that actually is destroying you. Because we spend a third of our lives at work. Work life is life. You can't have great well-being in your life if you have, a terrible, unhealthy work life. So unfortunately, even though I witnessed all of that, I went on the same path as my mom. I went into the crazy agency world. I was working a million hours. I didn't really have meaning or purpose in my job. I wasn't able to create the way I wanted to. I was working for very untrustworthy leaders. And it got to the point where it took hitting some real lows, where I physically, mentally, and emotionally hit a rock bottom. That was my wake up moment to go, this is insanity and this is not okay. And that's what really led me on my whole well-being journey. I moved from Chicago to California and really pursued well-being in my work life and my personal life. And then I started diving into human behavior research because it was something I loved, developing frameworks and really understanding why we do what we do, why we don't do certain things we want to do. And that understanding led me to kind of want to dive deeper. So I went over into the psychology side, became a cognitive behavioral therapy practitioner, a meditation teacher, kind of working on brain training and mind management. And I had a coaching practice that eventually became very focused on well-being at work. At first, it was kind of overall health and happiness. And then more and more, I felt like it was the big stressor was work. And I don't know how to be the right leader. And I don't know how to deal with this boss. And then it was at about 2017, 2018, where well-being and work was starting to really be used in the same sentence for the first time. And it was amazing. And my mom and I were like, this is awesome. But why is stuff worse than ever? Why is stress and burnout and unhappiness and loneliness? Why are all these things skyrocketing when we have more wellness tech than ever? We have more books and research and thought leaders talking about it. Why are we missing the mark? And that's what really got us to just start with our research curiosity to go, well, first of all, what even is well-being at work? If we can't really define it, then we're not going to be able to get there. And like I mentioned a little bit, there was so much noise out there. People screaming at you. It's about purpose. Oh, what your team wants most is appreciation. Oh, just find what you're passionate about and everything will be perfect. And we were like, God, that doesn't seem right. And so that's what really led us down our research journey. And I never could have guessed that we would have developed an entire platform and all these tools around it. But once we got those insights, we went, okay, how do we really help people now? And that's what really brought us to create everything we've created.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I think what you've created is something spectacular. I am really excited about the book coming out, and I think that's going to be, I think it's going to be huge. I'm looking forward to seeing it, and I think with all the success that Myers-Briggs has had, there's clearly people want to understand what drives them and what helps them and what drives and helps their the people in their organization. So I think you're onto something great here. I think this is going to be the future. I would be surprised if this isn't kind of the framework that people, talk about in business school and just constantly in all businesses. So I look forward to seeing that. I'm glad you came on our show to share it. And I'd love to have you back on after we get a chance to read the book if you're open to it. Love to invite you back on the show and kind of dig in once we've had a chance to kind of read it and then be able to ask some more insightful questions instead of just kind of glossing over the top, if that would work for you.
I would love that. I have had so much fun chatting with you. I feel like we could have kept going for hours. So that's always when you're having a good time.
And I think on the next one, maybe we structure it. We've had people go for a very long time. And so I'd love to have you on it and kind of do that and kind of deep dive, especially if we find a particular topic and just kind of, and not worry about the time and just kind of go into it and really, so I like that kind of stuff. But I think this was fantastic. Before we go, could you tell everybody one more time where they can find out more about you and your company and your book?
Absolutely. Motivesmet.com has a ton of information, free resources. We're going to have information about the book up there shortly. And from a social standpoint, I am most active on LinkedIn. So you can find me, Kelly Mackin, on LinkedIn and connect with me there. And I share a lot of fun stuff there.
Fantastic. Well, again, thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.